My channel.
My channel. Mine. Mine. If you'd like to chat, banter, fuck. Hello, Champagne Nightmares, and welcome back to my channel. I'm your girl, Miss J, your trash queen of glam, geek, and gore. And today we've got another horror-related video for you today, just in time for spooky season. And we're going to talk about my top 10 favorite off-the-wall, bizarre, gory, bananas, horror movie deaths. So if you're excited for some blood and some gore and a little bit of cheese factor, sit down and strap yourselves in, kittens, because we're getting ready to go right now. Alright, so I love horror movies. I especially love slasher movies. And what I love about slasher films is that they're always looking for new, inventive, crazy ways to kill people. And so a lot of them are fun, some of them are off the wall, and some of them are just memorable. They're classics. And so I wanted to pull together 10 of my absolute favorites. And so we're going to talk about them since it's Halloween and it's time for scary movies anyway. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm doing the 31 days of Halloween where I'm watching 31 horror movies throughout the month of October. This is a perfect time to catch up on them. So if you haven't seen some of these horror movie deaths, I would definitely recommend adding them onto your 31 days of Halloween checklist so you make sure that you see them because they are bananas. So let's get started with an absolute iconic death with number 10. So number 10 is from Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood. And of course, this is a classic. This is one that people, even if they haven't seen a lot of Friday the 13th movies, even if they're not super familiar with the franchise, they know about it. It was something that they parodied in Part 10. And it's also something that made its way into the Friday the 13th, the video game. And that is the sleeping bag kill. So Jason is stalking some teenagers, as he's known to do, and he finds a woman in a sleeping bag in a tent, and so he pulls the sleeping bag out and he whacks her against the tree. Now, I've seen Kane Hodder talk about that kill at a horror convention, Days of the Dead, and he talked about the fact that the way the censors were censoring slasher movies in those days, that kill was actually supposed to be even more graphic, even more ridiculous. With the final cut of the film, he only got one whack against the tree, but the original plan was to have several whacks, and there were things within the sleeping bag that were filled with fake blood, and so it was supposed to get more bloody and more meaty sounding as it went on. So even though the one that we got is still pretty good with the sleeping bag kill, it could have been even better if it wasn't for those pesky censors. Number 9 is Allie from Sleepaway Camp 2, and she's the one who gets pushed into the outhouse by Angela. So Sleepaway Camp 2, let's get it out there right from the very beginning. It's a little bit of a trashy, transphobic movie. I mean, I love cheesy horror, and I understand that part of why it's so transphobic is that they just didn't know how to deal with creating a sequel to something that had that big reveal at the end, and so they just slapped together a continuing story for Angela, and it wasn't very sensitive or aware of trans people and their actual lived lives. I get it. Like, I am not a big fan of the way that Sleepaway Camp 2 and 3 dealt with Angela and the way that they created this sort of trans character. It's not done very well. But I do really like the kill that they did with Allie. And so Angela sort of corners her and takes her to this outhouse and is asking her, "What's down there, Allie?" And she's like, "Piss. You pissed away all your ambitions and your dreams," or whatever. So what else is down there? Shit. You've shit on all the people around you and all this kind of stuff. And what else is down there? I don't know. So she pushes her in and she says, "There's leeches down there." And then she's got this stick and she keeps pushing her down. And she pops up and she's got leeches all over her face and she pushes her down again. And so she drowns her in an outhouse. And that one really affected me because my family used to go up to Saskatchewan. And we would stay in Knossi Lake, and my uncle's friends had this cabin, and it did not have indoor plumbing, and it had this outhouse, and I was terrified of that outhouse. I didn't like it. One time I went out there, and there was this huge spider with like an egg sac. Oh, gross. I could have died. I could have died. Literally. That spider could have killed me. One time my uncle was out there, and he turned around after doing his business, and there was a squirrel, and he's like, oh, shouted, and he scared the squirrel, and it jumped, and it fell into the outhouse. So I don't like outhouses. They creep me out. They're gross. And so that kill really affected me. And it's gross, it's funny, and ridiculous. So that would be my number 9. Number 8 is the opening sequence to Cube. So Cube is a movie that is a little bit culty. Not a lot of people seem to know about it. I really like it, and I think that if you really sit and think about the characters, there's a lot to pull apart, and so the English major in me really loves it because there's a lot to dissect and sort of rip up. But the opening sequence is gory and crazy, and it really sets the stage for what's about to happen. So the story is that all of these people wake up in this cube, and so you're in a room, and there are doors, little like hatch doors in each of the 4 walls, the floor, and the ceiling. And so as they're exploring, they start to find each other, and they realize there's other people trapped in this cube as well. And they eventually figure that some of the rooms have these deadly traps. So you have to try to figure out whether or not a room has a trap. How do you know? And it's a really interesting sort of process. But the opening sequence sets up this person. You don't know who they are, but he's kind of crawling through the rooms, and he goes into this room, and he steps into the middle, and you hear this sound, this like whoosh sound. And then all of a sudden, he breaks down into these little cubes. And what it was is this like mesh sheet of razor wire slams right through him, and he basically gets cut up into little tiny cubes. So it's really funny and gory and gross, and it sets the stage for the deadly traps. Now that one is there just to be kind of a visual kind of sight gag. None of the other traps are quite that involved, but just as deadly and gory. So it's a fun movie. There are 2 sequels. I haven't seen the last one, but Cube 2 is okay. It plays around with some weird things, like time, and that aren't as good, but definitely check out Cube. Number 7 is this couple from Bride of Chucky. And I don't know, it's been a while since I've seen that movie, and I didn't go look it up to see if they had names or whatever. But they were just this couple, and they were in this like honeymoon lodge, kind of one of those cheap motels that's supposed to be pseudo-romantic, but it's just kind of white trash. And so there's this like heart-shaped jacuzzi tub, and there's a mirror above it. So one of those kind of places, like real classy. Like not a bathhouse, but like one step up. And so they're in the tub, and Tiffany, the doll, comes out, and she's walking across, and they notice her and scream or whatever, and she's carrying a champagne bottle, and she throws the champagne bottle up into the mirror, and the shards of the mirror come down and stab the couple. And it's absolutely ridiculous. It's so stupid and funny that I absolutely love it. That's one that, who the characters are hasn't stuck with me, but that kill itself has absolutely stuck with me. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's weird. I think it's funny. And it really gets at the sort of weird humor of those later Child's Play movies. I think that it's absolutely perfect in tone for that installment of the franchise. All right, number 6 is the death of the coach in Nightmare on Elm Street 2. If you haven't seen Nightmare on Elm Street 2, there's a fantastic horror documentary called Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street, which is all about the story of Mark Patton, who starred as Jesse Walsh. And I actually included it in my video of my top 6 horror documentaries. I'll make sure I link that up in the cards if you want to go ahead and take a watch on that. But it was very homoerotic. There was all of this like gay subtext, and some of it wasn't even subtext. It was just like text. And so Jesse is like being tormented by Freddy, and Freddy is taking over his body. And somehow Jesse, this high schooler, ends up at this weird like S&M leather bar, and he runs into his weird sadistic coach. And the coach takes him back to the locker room at the high school. Like, none of this is good. None of this bodes well. And then, of course, Freddy takes control of Jesse and kills the coach. And it was in a movie that didn't really have any female nudity. It had some male nudity. So that whole homoerotic thing was really explored in that movie in interesting ways. And I just remember that scene of the coach because, I mean, he kind of kicked off some of my like daddy fetish that I have. Don't judge me. It's fine. And so it was just weird to see a naked man in a horror movie where usually there was like tits galore, but you didn't see a whole lot of naked men. And so that was one that I thought was kind of a little bit sexy, a little bit different, definitely unexpected. And that movie in general has so much interesting stuff in terms of sex and sexuality and gender that it's definitely worth a watch. And absolutely check out the documentary Scream Queen, My Nightmare on Elm Street. And don't forget to check out my video as well. Number 5 is the death of Taryn in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors was really interesting for a lot of reasons. Now, if you want to see how that movie influenced me and my thoughts on that film a little bit deeper, I will go ahead and link up in the cards my recent video where I talked about 13 horror influences, and that was one of them. But I really liked her death in particular. I think there was a lot of great sequences, and I think they did some interesting things. I think that Dream Warriors is kind of right in the middle. I think the ones before that were a little bit more typical slasher deaths, even though Freddy Krueger was, in dreams and he could kind of bend reality. They hadn't gone too far, and so third is where it starts to turn, and it starts to get a little bit more dreamlike and a little bit more absurd. And then, of course, the later sequels start to take that even further, and some of them get kind of ridiculous and almost a little stupid, but I think Dream Warriors is kind of that sweet spot in between the more traditional just knife kills of the earlier movies and the more ridiculous ones of later. And Taryn in particular, she had been a drug addict, and so when she goes into the dream world, she's got this like crazy mohawk, and she's in this leather outfit, and she says, "In my dreams, I'm beautiful and bad." And it's so cheesy, and I absolutely love it. She's played by Jennifer Rubin, who I met at Days of the Dead Charlotte when they had a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 reunion. She was a lot of fun, and when I went to her table to get her picture, get us an autographed picture and take a selfie with her, I was wearing a dress that had bees on it, and she, of course, was in a remake of The Wasp Woman, so we talked about that as well. That's one that I've been trying to find, but it's harder to find on DVD. I loved that remake. It was sort of like the original Wasp Woman, but they added all this weird gore, and it was just a good time. So I loved that one. And then her death is crazy because Freddy has, like, this weird killer drug. Instead of knives, those are his fingers, and so he injects them into her arm, and that's what kills her. And so it's really weird. It's an interesting kind of fun kill, and it's one that definitely sticks in my mind. Number 4 is dear to my heart because it is the death of Janessa from Jason X. Now, Janessa is a character that I was hoping would be included in Friday the 13th, the game, once they added the expansion pack for the Grendel and all of the Jason X content. Who knows if that'll ever happen? There's been some movement with the lawsuit. We can always hope that Gun Media will come through, and hopefully Janessa will be a part of the game. If you'd like to see my countdown, guess what I'm going to do? Up here in the cards. But in terms of deaths, Janessa had kind of a terrible death, and I was really hoping she was going to make it to the end. She was so close. She was one of the last people to die, if not the last. I can't remember. It's been a little while since I've seen it. But she made it almost all the way to the end. And basically, they had escaped to a different ship, and thought they were getting away, and all of a sudden Jason comes, and he cuts open the side of the ship, and everything starts getting sucked out into space. And so everybody's trying to make it to this door with this airlock, and they get almost everybody in, and she's almost there. They're reaching for her, and then this like metal grate has fallen over the hole. So like there's this metal grate, kind of like you can imagine it's going to happen very similar to what happens in Cube. And so there's this metal grate there, and they're almost reaching for her. And then she has this terrible pun line. It's so bad. And she just says, "This sucks on so many levels." And then she gets sucked through the metal grate. And of course it chops her up. So Janessa did not make it all the way to the end of Jason X. But her death was pretty memorable, even if she did go out on a really bad pun. Number 3 is the death that kind of inspired this list. And I knew years ago when I saw this, it was so ridiculous, I knew that I had to have it in some sort of top 10 list. And that is the death of Rose McGowan as Tatum in the original Scream. And she's the one who got squished in the garage door trying to go through the doggy door, but then her big old titties got her stuck there. There's something about that was just so ridiculous. I thought with all of the safety features that are on garage doors, that somehow she's trying to crawl out through the doggy door and her big old titties get her stuck. I can sympathize. And she gets scrunched and her neck breaks in the garage door. So it's absolutely ridiculous. I love the movie Scream. Now, absolutely, the death of Drew Barrymore at the very beginning is chilling, and it was so unexpected, and it really kind of set the stage for Scream to be this movie that played with your expectations. But I love that they included that ridiculous, over-the-top, campy kill of having Tatum get squished in the garage door. Number 2 is the opening sequence of the film Ghost Ship. Now, Ghost Ship is a remake of an old black and white horror film. I think it was Hammer Films did a whole bunch of remakes of like 13 Ghosts and The House on Haunted Hill. If that's not the name of the company, I'll make sure that I include it above. But I think it is Hammer Films. And the film itself was pretty good. I mean, it was okay. It was not great. But the opening sequence makes up for any of the faults in the film. The opening sequence is gory and ridiculous and crazy. And basically, it's this cruise ship. It's very similar to the opening of Cube, but on a much bigger scale. And so you have this cruise ship, and there's this big fancy dress party, and there's this little girl in a white dress, and she's dancing with the captain of the ship, and she's kind of got her arm around his waist, and they're dancing. It's very sweet. And there's this cable that's like strung around the ship, and all of a sudden something like is pulling it tight, and it gets whipped across the whole crowd and cuts everyone in half. And so it's this excuse to have all these gore effects of like pieces of limbs coming apart, and like people, they're cut in half, and the top part of the body slides off, and even though they're cut in half, people are like trying to crawl. And it's sort of ridiculous, and it doesn't really make sense, because they try to make you believe that somehow this went over the little girl's head. So she's the only person at that party that's left alive. But it's just kind of ridiculous and fun and hokey. And it's absolutely one of those special effects sequences that you have to see to believe, because they just went over the top with the gore and how ridiculous it was. So it's definitely worth watching. The Ghost Ship movie was okay, but nothing in the movie will live up to that opening sequence. So if you just want to watch it for that first scene, that's okay too. Now we have an honorable mention. So all the ones that we've been talking about so far have been people who are victims of the killer, or people who are trying to survive the whatever circumstance or killer it is. Now, my honorable mention goes to Mrs. Voorhees from Friday the 13th, Part 1. I thought that that was an amazing sequence that they did. The special effects that Tom Savini put together, where Alice, played by Adrienne King, goes and she decapitates Mrs. Voorhees, played by Betsy Palmer, with the machete, and the slow motion and the way that the head kind of topples off, and you have this neck that's spurting blood while the hands are kind of clawing at the air. So good. It's so well done. But she's not technically a victim. It's not a slasher kill. That's the final girl triumphing over the killer in the movie. So that's an honorable mention. It doesn't make it onto the official list, but I had to mention it because it's absolutely a favorite. And number 1, I had to include a death from my favorite movie, Sleepaway Camp. Again, if you want to hear more about Sleepaway Camp, check out my video that I linked earlier. I'll have it down in the description box of 13 horror influences. But there are so many great, weird deaths in Sleepaway Camp. But my absolute favorite is one that doesn't entirely make sense. And that's Judy. So Judy is kind of the mean girl of the camp. She and the counselor, Meg, sort of band together and they like to torture and harass and bully Angela. And so there's a scene where Judy has sort of left the evening festivities and she's back in the cabin and she's curling her hair. And all of a sudden somebody comes into the cabin and she can't see who it is. And then all of a sudden she realizes that she recognizes somebody. Is it Ricky? Is it Angela? We don't know. Except we kind of do know. And you know, because I've told you many times in these videos. So if you haven't been paying attention, you might not know. But you know. And so she's like, oh, and she stops paying attention. And the person like puts a pillow over her head and holds her down. And then you see them raise up the curling iron and then jab it down. And then Judy's hand comes up and like claws at the air. So clearly she got a hot curling iron to the choach. Now, listen. I imagine that that is not comfortable. I think that there's probably some severe damage. But would that actually kill you? I don't really know if a hot curling iron to the genitalia, would that actually kill someone? I don't know. I don't think we need to do any market testing. It's just something that I wonder about. I just don't know. But it fascinates me. It's creepy. And it brings in more of that sexuality element that I think Sleepaway Camp plays with in really interesting ways. Because, of course, it's a symbol of penetration, of sexuality. So I think that it's just another way that Sleepaway Camp really plays with those ideas of gender and sex and sexuality in very interesting and nuanced ways. All right, so that is my list of top 10 over-the-top, campy, crazy horror film deaths. What did you think? Did I include your favorites? Are there other ones that you think I should have included on this list? Are there other films with crazy kills that maybe I haven't seen that you need to tell me about down in the comments right now because you just can't live with yourself? If I don't know about these films with these crazy deaths, let me know. Let me know down in the comments below what movies I should watch, what crazy kills you think I should have included on this list. Who knows, maybe we'll do a follow-up for next year's spooky season. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up or give it a thumbs down. We'll take the engagement either way. The algorithm is not a picky bitch, so we'll take it. If you'd like to, you can also subscribe. And don't forget when you do that to also hit the bell icon so that you'll get notifications of all future uploads. I upload every week, usually on Tuesdays. Sometimes things get a little delayed. And occasionally I also have a bonus video during the week. So definitely be on the lookout for that. If you would like to chat, banter, or commiserate between uploads, don't forget that all of my social media will be linked down in the description box, as well as a link to my website that has more great makeup and lifestyle content, The World of Champagne, at janessaj.com. Thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate all of you, and until I see you again, bye.